You got it. Thank you. And thank all of you, Hollins Church, for letting Church Answers be a part of your life and your church. It's not always the case where we come to a situation where we have as much hope as we do and as much prospects as we do. And I will simply say that we have had a lot of clients lately from Global Methodist, and it's apparent in many ways that many of these churches are seeking a fresh start as they move to another denomination and as they move to new opportunities. I understand that you probably would have had this health regardless of being a part of Global Methodist or not, because you were headed in a good direction, especially in the last 2 years. Now, I want to be clear on something. This is not the consultation report. There is a full report that we have prepared. This is the part of it that deals with your community. And by community, of course, we're going to define exactly what that community is. If you have disagreement with how we define the community, that is fine, because we can then adjust it accordingly and then give you some different data. The likelihood, though, is that the data is going to be very similar, even if we make some adjustments. So you will understand that as we move forward. The main thing I want to do is present to you the community right around your church, and I'll explain what right around means, and that so that you can see the opportunities that are before you. And to say that there are opportunities before you is probably going to be an understatement. There are some critical opportunities and some exciting opportunities. Let me also say this. I will make reference to some other parts of the consultation. I need to, in order to provide some context for the community portion of it. And I am not trying to jump ahead to some of the other elements that are being presented to you, but I do want you to know that you'll hear something about maybe 1 or 2 or 3 other parts as it ties into the community. But ultimately, this is all about the community around your church. And so with that in mind, I'm going to go right on. And let me get down here. Okay, some of you may want to know, how do we do what we do? In other words, how do we get this data? How do you make these conclusions? Where do you get these numbers? I don't know if this will mean a lot to all of you, but it may mean something to some of you, because the data is very important, and it also is, as we can tell, extremely accurate according to the source we have. Church Answers partners with Esri, and that is a company that is one of the most powerful mapping and spatial data analytical companies in the world. And what Esri does is they send us raw data, and we're able to take that raw data. They have billions of points of information. They are used by governmental agencies. They're used by large corporations. And as we have sought over the years to find the best partner to get our data, we get it from Esri. In the past, we got it from other sources, but for the last 7 years, we have been getting it from Esri. We encourage churches, when they look at their community, to look at a drive time. As you're thinking about what is the community around Hollins Church, we used a 15-minute drive time. Now, you could change that. You can say, no, let's make it broader. Let's go to a 20-minute drive time, or you can tighten it and say, let's go to 8 or 9-minute drive time. You also can go to zip code, you can do radius, you can do a number of other alternatives. But most of the time when we look at a community, we're saying, how long does it take someone to drive to that church? And usually we're using a 10 to 15-minute drive time. Now, you can imagine in the demographic community where you're located, that 15 minutes is going to be a lot of people. As I've driven around your community, it becomes obvious that there's not only existing homes, but we see the potential of a lot of homes that are going up as well. But all the information that you're seeing here is a 15-minute drive time. And if I put the map up, I don't have it in this presentation, but if I put the map up, you would see that it would be this solid mass with some kind of fingers sticking out, that some places that can get to the church within 15 minutes. So the issue that we're looking at here is, what does our community look like? Or let's look at it another way. In Acts 1:8, you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. This is your Jerusalem. Now think about it for just a moment. When Jesus began his earthly ministry, the first thing he did was call his disciples. And when he called his disciples, he said, "Come and follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." He began his ministry by saying, we need to reach people, fishers of men, or the broader translation, fishers of people. Then, as he ended his ministry, about to ascend to heaven, he looked at his followers and he said, "You will be my witnesses." And of course, he began with Jerusalem. My point in this is Jesus' beginning of his earthly ministry to the end of his earthly ministry was about reaching people. And we're going to talk about that a good bit in the context of this information. I've already said this is redundant, but we do take the billions of data points provided to us by Esri. And what we do, what our team does, is we convert them into usable data for churches. The way the information is presented, it could go in literally billions of different directions. So what we're doing is we take data and we said, what is the thing that a church needs to know the most? For example, the percentage of the population that has a church home or does not have a church home. That is in this information, but you wouldn't know it until you began to scrape the data and begin to get that information specifically for churches. Okay, so that's understanding the data. Now I want to go to a little bit of overlap into some material that you will see later, but it is necessary for you to see this in the context of the community. I am going to put up 6 purposes of the church. Again, these 6 are not universally accepted as the 6, but there's 6 that are commonly accepted. And at least for the purpose of analysis, we can stick with these six purposes. This is information that you gave us. You gave us this information if you took a Know Your Church survey. You gave us this information if we interviewed you, and we put this data together. And this is what you said about yourself, but I want to put it in the context of the community, and you'll understand what I'm saying in just a moment. First purpose that I have here is worship. Your score, self-evaluated, is the score is not as important as the category. 76.92 doesn't mean a thing to you, but you evaluated the worship, the corporate worship of your church, self-evaluated as healthy. I have to say, to see any church in any category with a healthy rating, self-analysis is unusual. Most churches do not rate themselves as highly. It is a good thing because you see the worship of your church as healthy. This is primarily talking about the worship services. Prayer. Don't let marginally healthy throw you off. The score that you gave yourself was marginally healthy, but we've got to say this. We don't see much marginal health in churches. When you have almost 90% of churches in need of serious revitalization in the United States, most churches would not even get close to the marginally healthy area. So thus far, out of 2 purposes, you at least have healthy as the noun, healthy and marginally healthy. Let's go to another purpose of the church. You self-scored fellowship, koinonia, how we interact with one another, the joy, the unity, as marginally healthy. Again, don't let the marginally throw you off. This is a good number, especially as compared to the 400,000 churches in the United States. Discipleship. You rated yourself again as marginally healthy. And again, we agree from everything that we're seeing that your self-reflection of your church is pretty much matching a lot of what we are seeing as an external party. The 5th purpose of the church, ministry. This is ministry to people who have needs in the church. It's not really as much about ministry in the community. We're going to look at that in just a moment, but this is internal ministry. This is taking care of your own and looking after your own. Once more, marginally healthy. Now let's stop for just a moment. We've got 5 of the 6 purposes. We've got healthy as a noun in all of them. healthy, and then 4 marginally healthy. It is extremely rare for us to see self-ratings this high. And here's the reality. We agree with you for the most part. Our purpose today is not to go through the health of the church as much as it is to look at the community, but I wanted to give you that context. You as a church have a very healthy view of your church, even though some of the purposes score marginally healthy. This is way above national norms. But I want you to see the 6th purpose, and we agree with you on this too: evangelism. You rate yourself unhealthy. The metrics would rate yourself unhealthy, and we would rate yourself unhealthy. Evangelism means intentionally reaching people with the gospel of Jesus Christ by explicitly telling them how they can have a relationship with Christ, become a believer, and then a follower as an active disciple in the church. You rate yourself low. We would do the same. Now, if you think I'm sounding critical at this point, simply know this: the unhealthy score is normal. That doesn't mean it's good. It just means it is normal. Fewer than 5% of churches in North America even reach the marginally healthy in evangelism. So the fact that you're in the unhealthy category, it is an area for concern, but it is also an area to understand you're not that different than most churches. Most churches weaken in evangelism. We have been studying these 6 purposes of churches and doing surveys since 1996, and the evangelism score is a score that continues to erode across churches in America. That coincides with the fact that there are fewer Christians in America. That coincides with the fact that our mission field has grown, even though we do not have workers in the field sufficiently. Okay, the reason I gave you all of these is because as we look at the community, I want us to focus. If I could put a circle around it, I would do it. And I'm sure there's some edit function where I can do this. I would circle this evangelism score. And I would say, okay, if this is unhealthy, how can we reach people? Well, the first thing you've got to ask him before you say how is, what is the community we need to reach? That is what we're going to explain today. There will be a lot of other things that we have done and will be doing in our consultation, but this is going to focus upon knowing your community so that you can reach your community. So that is the context I wanted to put this. Now, when Church Answers does a consultation, we have 4 different levels of recommendation. We usually put this internally, but this is not a recommendation for you. So don't gasp when you see the first one. This is just, we're going to make one of these 4 to any churches. And we will proceed with our consultation with one of these 4. I want you to see the 4 possible ones. 3% of the time, we say close the doors. Bring another church in, let it use your facility, and reach the community. You are not reaching the community. And the 3% of the recommendations we make is close the doors. We always want a church to be in that community. We always want there to be a vibrant ministry. But many churches today in America are on the precipice of death. We don't necessarily deal with a lot of those churches because they usually don't come to us by the time they get that bad off. But 3% of the time, we just say, you know, it's time to make way for another church. Definitely not a recommendation for Hollins Church. Another one is immediate triage. Brad and I made this recommendation to a church in Louisiana earlier this week in a similar Zoom presentation, and our recommendation to them was immediate triage. We felt like they could only focus on one major adjustment, and they did not have the capability immediately to focus on more than one major adjustment. And so that church fell into the 44% category where we say, let's focus on one thing before we start focusing on a lot of other things in the church. We have to get this one thing right, or we cannot get the other parts right. Major adjustments, focus on multiple things at one time, 41%. That is going to be pretty close to where we're seeing Holland right now. Again, this is not the consultation recommendation, but just simply to say that there are several areas that you can focus on. And the good news is you have the ability to do so. When it's immediate triage, that means the church only has the ability to do one thing. And if they don't get that right, then the others are basically without help. The major adjustments means that you can focus on multiple things and move forward. We would put Hollins more in that category. Minor adjustments. Again, there's a temptation for me with the scores that you have to say you're pretty close to the minor adjustments category, the healthier churches. However, because of your evangelism score, I would put you closer to the major adjustments than to the minor adjustments. Okay, that's the context in which we want to look at the community. These are the way that we do consultations. I would have you somewhere between major adjustments and minor adjustments. So right there is where I would see Hollins. And again, that is a reflection of a relatively healthy church. And certainly with the consultations that we do, we've done a little over 1,000 of them. This is a good score relative to others. And again, my purpose at this point is not to present the consultation itself, but just to give you enough context so that the community makes sense to you. We're leaning toward major adjustments, again, because of evangelism. We think that that's going to take more work. And so it is going to be not just a minor adjustment, but it's a major adjustments. And so we will lean in that direction. So keep in mind these numbers, and keep in mind that we have you right here in the 41% or the 12%, somewhere in that category. We don't have to be specific, but you can see that this is not a triage and this is not a death. It's somewhere between major adjustments and minor adjustments. So why does Holland Church need to make adjustments at all? I mean, y'all love your church. You love each other. That came through so clear that there was joy in your congregation, there was unity in your congregation, that there was a sense that God's got his hand on this church. You love your pastors, you love your church, so okay, why can't we keep things the way they are? Because if you do, they will not stay the way they are. They will decline. You will head toward decline unless you start making a major adjustment. You were in decline for many years, and then in the last 2 years, we've begun to see an uptick. We also believe that you will begin to reach more people with a Methodist background, perhaps those who are disfellowshipped or have come out of United Methodist churches. They may come to your church, but that is not the major issue we want to address. The major issue we want to address is how can we reach people who don't have a church and who don't have saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. So why does Hollins need to make adjustments? The greatest need is evangelism. Plain and simple. You told us that. The data indicates that. All of the indicators would tell us that evangelism is your greatest need, and that's why it needs to be adjusted. And you'll see a lot of our consultation report focusing upon that major purpose. It's been recognized by you, the church members. It's been recognized by your church leaders, and we recognize it as well too. That is why the timing of this community presentation is so appropriate, because eventually we'll be talking about how can we reach our community in terms of a strategy for the church moving forward. Now, to be clear, that's not all we will be recommending. There will be a lot of other parts that will come to that. And so there will be multiple adjustments. We think the church can handle it, but the major adjustment is evangelism. Now, I'll come back to this number. Look at the numbers. Look at the opportunities. The population within a 15-minute drive of the church is over 77,000. Of that total, almost 49,000 are without a church home. Pause on that for just a moment. nearly 50,000 people living within a 15-minute drive of your church do not have a church home. You say, how do we know these numbers? Esri actually does surveys from which they extrapolate these numbers. I understand that the statistical accuracy is on point, but it's actually surveys. And some of the surveys say, I am not in a church. I am unlikely to attend church. And they extrapolate those numbers to give you what we have today. That's why these numbers are so incredibly powerful. Now, we don't know the Christian, non-Christian population, but I think that we can make a presumption that of the 48,845, which represents 63% of the community, that many of those are not Christians. I know that going to church does not save someone, but we would presume that many of these people who are not going to church are not Christians. That is what I want to emphasize to you more than anything in this community study. What did Jesus say? The harvest fields are ripe or white. And he didn't say pray for opportunities to reach people. He didn't say pray that we can discover who the lost people are. He says the need is for workers in the harvest field. Pray to the Lord of the harvest to send more workers into his field. So this is the number. This number blows me away, that you have an unchurched population, probably a significant portion of them, of nearly 50,000 people living within a 15-minute drive of your church. Why do you need to make adjustments? Because you can. It is unusual to have a church with the level of resources that you have in leadership, in finances, in facilities, in workers among the laity, in staff. You have been given by God the resources that you need to move forward. And as we look at this community analysis, I think you're going to see, wow, there is an incredible need, and we can do this in God's power. Okay, let's continue to look at some of the things in the whole idea of the demographics and psychographics of the church. Demographics are who the people are. Psychographics are basically what are they thinking, what are their needs, what are their wants, what are their desires. Again, demographic information, a lot of that can be obtained by census information, but quite frankly, Esri helps the Census Bureau a good bit in some of their data. Psychographic is when you survey people and you find out exactly what their needs are. So the extrapolated information that we got on the community can get us into the minds, the needs, the wants, the hopes, and the hurts of your community. And let's look at these. One of these demographic pieces of data, and quite frankly, this again is extrapolated, but in round numbers, the net growth within a 15-minute drive of your church will not go below 1,000 new residents every year. For the foreseeable future, you will have 1,000 new residents coming into that 15-mile drive. So it's not only that you have 50,000 that around 50,000, 48,000 plus that need to be reached, you've got another 1,000 new residents coming into that very short distance called a 15-minute drive. Your population is projected to continue growth. And quite frankly, if I showed this information to different types of pastor denominations and leaders, they would say, oh my goodness, I wish I was in a community like this. I wish we had this opportunity. This was a little bit of a surprise, but again, I don't know your community, so I shouldn't say that there's a surprise there. But as you start thinking about who we're going to reach, understand this: a quarter of the households with children, these are the homes that do have children in them, are single parent homes. And while the majority of them are single moms, there are a good number of single dads as well. And the data will point to that. And this may be a future strategy for you. We are not including this in the initial strategy of the first year. You can, if you want to. Our strategy for the church will go with some other more basic, non-demographic, but this is something that you can think about now or in the future. Half of the community is under the age of 40. This is a young community. And if you look around your peers there, I can't see you, so I'm not going to say you're old. But you might see your peers there are more in the other category, above the age of 40. I don't know. I can't see. I can only see some of you. But half of the community within a 15-minute drive is under the age of 40. This data point has a lot of evangelistic implications. It has a lot of outreach implications. It may have some worship implications, worship approaches, but the main thing it has is evangelism and outreach implications. You're not only in a growing community, you're not only in a highly unchurched community, you're also in a young community as well. Lots of opportunities. A large part of the population growth will come from Hispanics and Blacks. That does not mean that the 15-minute drive from your church is going to be dominated by Hispanics and Blacks. To the contrary, they will continue to be a relatively small portion. That is just to say, like most areas, they are becoming more multiracial and multi-ethnic. And this is not uncommon for your area. It's primarily Hispanic and Blacks. I did not get the breakdown of the Black community or the Hispanic community yet, but I don't know if the Black community is predominantly African American or if it's some other type of Black community. And I don't know the origin of all the Hispanics coming in, but simply say that you'll have a growth of Hispanics and Blacks. I put it there because as you're thinking about what are we going to do to reach people in the future, again, that is just something to put in your thought pattern according to the community analysis. This probably does not surprise you, but you're in a pretty affluent area. The community has above average giving potential. 46% almost of the income groups are making at least 100,000. Many of the households are going to 200,000 and above. Brad and I are involved in a consultation in the Colorado area, or in Colorado, and we thought this was high. That one was higher, but this is a pretty high. The only reason I put it there is just so you can know the income makeup. I'm not necessarily talking about this for a strategic reason, just simply to know that this is a part of your community. The community is purple politically. It is neither red nor blue. In fact, it's almost classic purple. I don't know if that has any implications whatsoever about anything, but I simply wanted you to know, probably you already do, that it's divided pretty equally between the different parts of the political spectrum, and it is not dominated by one or another, especially within this 15-mile radius. So what do we have in conclusion? And I want to leave plenty of time for questions. What do we have in conclusion? We have a church that has incredible resources. We have a church that is unified. We have a church where the unity is reflected in love toward one another. We have a church that is motivated to do things for others. We have a community that is large, but we have a community that largely does not know Christ. And the biggest opportunity that you will have in the years ahead is to reach those who are not followers of Christ. Traditionally, denominational churches, not only Methodist, but other denominations as well, traditionally, they have gotten their growth from what we call transfer growth. Transfer growth is when a Christian moves from one church to another, either moving to the town or moving from one church in the community to another church in the community. You will find less and less of that happening in the future. Now, for certain, during the transition time, as many United Methodist churches go global Methodist, or some decide to remain United Methodist, you may have more Methodists that will come and join your church. But the real opportunity before you, the real opportunity is not transfer Methodist growth. It is people who do not know Christ. Many of them have never been in church. Many of them don't have any plans to go to church. Another thing I want to share with you. This is not a part of the community study, but just to let you hear some of the opportunities that are there. In our studies of inviting church people to come to be a part of your church, having conversations with them, we have found that upwards of 85% plus are receptive to a conversation from a Christian, either to be invited or a gospel conversation. There is a perception that unchurched people are resistant to the gospel. In our research that we have done over the years, we only find 5% that are actually hostile to the gospel. There may be a lot of neutrality in there, but hostility is only with a very small portion, even among those who have no affiliation with the church, never have, and who have never even thought about being a Christian. What I see, quite frankly, is opportunity. What I see is God-given opportunity. And this part of our consultation, the community part, reflects this so strongly that all I can say is God has given you a great gift of a great church with a great opportunity. Brad was involved in a lot of the interviews. Brad, I'll let you say what you want to do, but I just want you to affirm, I'm asking you to affirm, but I know that you've already said this, the unity within the church and what we have heard in terms of the joy that is present there, which is a big thing moving forward.
Yes. In fact, one example of the unity was there were three of us that did interviews. Dr. Lawless was part of that. And when I summarized all of the things that I heard in our 2 days of interviews, Dr. Lawless, his response was, that's exactly the same things he heard. So, yeah, there was a real consistency, probably many of you in the room, as to all the things that Dr. Rayner talked about, particularly I'm gonna highlight the motivated part, a genuine interest in your church doing well and continuing to do well.
That's a good point, Brad, because we don't always deal with motivated churches. We often deal with churches that want a quick fix and expect the consultants to do it. Not so here. Your church is ready to move forward. Okay, that is the community presentation. We have a full, I think it's like 36 pages of data that I know some of you cannot wait to read and to go through just on the community alone. But I wanted to give you these highlights and this summary so that you can see the community and the opportunity that is before you. We're happy to take questions, or Greg, or any way that you want us to lead going forward, but that is our presentation at this point.